Today we have a very special guest all the way from Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. Alexandria the Great is the founder of Bitcoin Reach in Zimbabwe and a magazine contributor to Rootstock.io. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to have this discussion with you.
Great. So start by telling us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? What do you do?
So yeah, I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, but like I've had the privilege to be able to move from Zambia to live in Zambia, to live in South Africa, to live in Botswana. So these are, I'm talking about countries that are in SADC basically, and I've gotten to see how kind of backwards Zimbabwe has been. There's a quote, they say that Zimbabwe is developing as long as you haven't moved out of Zimbabwe. You think Zimbabwe is doing things until you moved out. So yeah, so I've had the privilege to live in different parts of Zimbabwe, parts of Africa, but I grew up predominantly in Zimbabwe. I'm studying business administration. I've always been a business fanatic. I've always studied investing. In fact, I predominantly looked up to guys like Warren Buffett. This guy called Roger Montgomery. He put value into value investing in, like, he taught me value investing pretty well. And it's only when I got into the stock market in 2020 because there was a crash. I remember telling all my friends, guys, get into the stock market now because stocks are incredibly cheap. You want to take advantage of this. No one listened to me. I got into the stock market and I made a good return. I think I did about a 40% return in my first year. Some of my stocks did 100% returns within a month, which is really impressive. And then I remember being pretty biased to Bitcoin. I was like, what's this Bitcoin? Warren Buffett dislikes it. Most of the guys who I looked up to disliked it. But it had outperformed. And then there was this one podcast who I always used to look up to. It was called the Investor Podcast with Preston Pitch. And Preston Pitch started recommending Bitcoin. And I was like, okay, let me start listening to these guys. Because I listened to them all before. They studied billionaires. And they made some really good points on Bitcoin. And then Elon Musk buys it. As soon as Elon Musk buys it, I'm like, I really wanted to buy it. But as soon as Elon Musk buys it, we see Bitcoin going from like around 20K to 8K. And I'm like, okay, I'm just so late. Let me get my first position into it. And I buy into it. And that's when I go on X. I finally create a Twitter account, and I get so many of these new jobs. I start working for multiple organizations, such as Bitcoin Magazine. I write a few articles on Bitcoin Magazine in terms of what's going on in Zimbabwe. I work with Global Bitcoin Fest, and Global Bitcoin Fest was a podcast or Twitter space that interviewed over 51 countries, and we would interview different communities all around the world. And then I realized that Zimbabwe didn't have its own community. We were falling behind because there was no one driving the adoption, no one fighting the regulations, no one fighting doing the education, no one trying to orange peel shops, for example, no one building applications for Bitcoin. It was primarily it was due to also the fact that when Bitcoin first started, especially in 2015. We were the hit. We were actually leading. We went from 100% to zero because we got a simplicity ban. And I was like, okay, if no one's gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna make the first steps. And then I met with Anita Posch, and I went to my first Bitcoin meetup. But Anita Posch is from Austrian. So she comes, but once in a while. And then from there, I just started developing the community, which is Bitcoin Reach. And I just view my job as doing everything that is ugly and no one else wants to do. And yeah, that's the education, that's working with companies such as Rootstock, that's doing Twitter spaces, that's writing articles, that's trying to getting people to sell Bitcoin back and forth. It's just trying to pave the path that hasn't been paved in Zimbabwe yet.